Late one night, Wyatt was suddenly woken up by an unsettling noise coming from his backyard. Trusting his instincts, he quickly checked the live feed from his outdoor security camera, expecting to see a wild animal or a tree branch moving in the wind. Instead, the camera showed something that made Wyatt's heart race, pushing him to take quick action. But before we start, smash the like button and make sure to subscribe if you haven't, and hit that notification bell so that you won't miss any new stories. Without a second thought, he grabbed his phone to call the cops, dialing the number with trembling hands. Wyatt held his breath as he listened to the beeps, waiting for someone to answer the phone. "Good night, this is Officer Samuels. What can I do for you?" The officer greeted him, and Wyatt immediately breathed a sigh of relief. Help would be on its way soon. "Officer, I need your help. I realize how bizarre this must sound, but there are bears dancing in my backyard," he exclaimed, fully aware of how strange the situation was. Then it remained silent for a few moments, and Wyatt almost thought that the officer had ended their call. "Hello? Can anyone hear me?" he asked, ready to dial the number again, only to catch Officer Samuels stifling a laugh. My apologies," the officer managed, clearing his throat. "Did you say there are bears dancing in your garden?" he asked. "Yes! They are dancing around a fire, performing some kind of dance. I have footage I can send to you. Please, send someone over quickly," Wyatt replied. But he immediately lost all hope. The officer was wheezing with laughter now. Wyatt angrily slammed down his phone. He knew that the officers didn't believe him, and the worst part was that he couldn't even really blame them. Rushing to a window for a better view, Wyatt carefully peeked outside, making sure not to attract the bears' attention. The live sight of them was far more unsettling than any footage, but despite his fear, Wyatt couldn't manage to look away. He calmly observed everything they did. After a while, they stopped dancing and sat down on logs placed around the fire. They just sat like that for some time, and then something unexpected happened that almost made Wyatt scream with fear. The bears, all 10 of them, suddenly turned around and looked him right in the eyes. They looked at him. Wyatt held his breath once again, and he was unable to move. The bears all got up from the logs and took a few steps in his direction. Instantly, the fear came rushing back, and Wyatt jumped up from his chair and ran back to his bedroom, locking the door behind him. This couldn't be happening. Yet there he was, wide awake in the dead of night, heart pounding in his chest. The reality of the situation was as hard to digest as the idea of it being a dream. Back on the phone, Wyatt's voice cracked, desperation seeping into every word. "Please, you've got to believe me, it's not a joke." But the cool dismissal he received in return felt like a slap. The officer's warning of potential fines for misuse of emergency services was the last thing Wyatt wanted to hear. Feeling more isolated than ever, he hung up, defeated. Frustration swelled within him as the officer's words echoed in his mind. Pranks? Fines? Was there no end to this night's madness? Returning to his post by the window, Wyatt found the backyard transformed. The bears were gone, leaving behind the fire, which now seemed to burn with an almost sinister glow. The quiet was unsettling. Had they really been there? Wyatt's sleep was anything but peaceful. Waking up felt like emerging from a deep, dark pool. The sunlight streaming through the window did little to dispel the heaviness of the night's events. The morning light was a balm, making fears seem like mere phantoms. As the day unfolded, Wyatt found himself caught up in the familiar whirl of life. The evening brought with it a chance for redemption. As the night wore on and the laughter died down, the memory of dancing bears became like a story from someone else's life. As dawn crept through the curtains, casting a soft glow into the room, Wyatt's resolve solidified. He grabbed his phone, fingers hovering before tapping out a message to his closest friends. He needed their help but didn't want to seem crazy as he left out the bewildering details of the previous night. The uncertainty of how they would respond weighed on him, but he hit send, the message now floating in the digital ether. One by one, the replies trickled in, each friend voicing their support, their words a mix of concern and curiosity. That evening, as his friends arrived, the atmosphere in Wyatt's living room shifted from tension to camaraderie. Wyatt waited, the weight of his story pressing on his shoulders until the last friend stepped through the door. With everyone settled, Wyatt stood, The room hushed in anticipation. "Thank you for coming," he began. "What I'm about to share might sound out there. Explaining this won't do it justice," Wyatt admitted, moving to his laptop. His hands were steady as he opened it, a silent invitation for his friends to gather around. The screen flickered to life, the cursor blinking like a beacon. "I'm going to show you," he said, a decision made. His fingers flew over the keyboard, searching, but the video that was supposed to prove everything seemed to have disappeared into thin air. Wyatt's frustration grew with every passing second, the absence of the footage gnawing at him. Had it been deleted? Or worse, had he imagined it all? Despite the setback, Wyatt turned to face his friends, the urgency clear in his voice. "Listen, I know how this sounds, but you have to believe me," he implored, his eyes scanning theirs for any sign of skepticism. He recounted every detail of the encounters, his narrative painting a vivid picture of the surreal events. The room was still, his friends absorbing the gravity of his words. As Wyatt's story unfolded, his friends' expressions transformed from casual curiosity to something deeper, more contemplative. There was no laughter, no disbelief, only a shared sense of wonder and concern. With the story told, Wyatt made his request. "Stay with me tonight. You'll see them, the bears, with your own eyes." The plea hung in the air, a mix of hope and anxiety. To his relief, his friends nodded, their agreement a lifeline thrown in the darkness of doubt. The laughter faded as the reality of their situation settled in, replaced by a focused seriousness. They were ready, or as ready as they could ever be. The strategy was to catch some sleep before the expected encounter, but the atmosphere was charged with too much anticipation for rest. Peering out into the velvet darkness, Wyatt's gaze locked onto the moving shadows that had become hauntingly familiar. The sight of the bears, once a source of dread, now sparked a defiant fire within him. The emptiness echoed his shock and disbelief. Where had they gone? The plan had been clear, and their roles had been set. The realization that he was alone, that his allies had inexplicably disappeared, sent a wave of dread crashing over him. Driven by a mix of fear and urgency, Wyatt raced through the house, each room's emptiness amplifying his despair. His friends and support had vanished, leaving him to face the looming threat alone. The truth hit Wyatt with the force of a physical blow. His friends, the ones who had promised to stand by him, were out there, possibly inches from danger. Wyatt burst into the backyard, his breath catching at the sight before him. One of his friends stood frozen, encircled by the towering dark figures of the bears. This was a moment Wyatt had dreaded, yet never truly imagined would come to pass. With no time to hesitate, Wyatt's adrenaline kicked into overdrive. His plan, designed for many, now rested solely on his shoulders. Clutching a pan in one hand and a portable speaker in the other, he launched into action. Wyatt charged forward, his every instinct focused on breaking through to his friend. Despite the chaos Wyatt unleashed, the bears showed a surprising resilience. Their numbers seemed to swell in the darkness, an intimidating force that no amount of noise or bravado seemed to diminish. Wyatt realized the scale of the challenge he faced. He was one against many, and it might not pan out how he originally had hoped. As Wyatt braced for another charge, the tumultuous night air suddenly stilled, the chaos halting as if paused by an unseen hand. The bears, moments ago a formidable presence, seemed to crumble where they stood, confusing Wyatt further. The once so scary creatures seemed to twist into ways he couldn't believe were real as Wyatt's heart began pounding in his chest. The confusion that clouded Wyatt's mind cleared in an instant, giving way to sheer astonishment. As the figures began to stir, the outlines of the bear-being suits became unmistakable, and one by one his friends emerged, laughter spilling from within the costumes. The reality of the situation dawned on him. The menacing bears were nothing more than fabric and fluff, a prank orchestrated by those he trusted most. The moment of realization struck Wyatt with the force of a thunderclap, leaving him speechless. What he had feared, what had tormented him, was all an elaborate joke. Relief washed over him, mingling with the remnants of fear as the absurdity of the situation set in. The threat had never been real, only a ruse, crafted with meticulous care to fool him. As the bare heads were removed, revealing the grinning faces of his comrades, the air filled with laughter. Wyatt's initial shock gave way to disbelief, then to amusement, as the reality of the prank sank in. There, under the night sky, surrounded by friends disguised as his fears, Wyatt found himself laughing along, the tension of the night dissolving into the absurdity of the moment. The elaborate deception, rooted in a past joke taken too far, stirred a whirlwind of emotions in Wyatt. Betrayal flickered briefly, overshadowed by the overwhelming relief that the nightmare was over. As the laughter continued, any lingering feelings of anger melted away, replaced by a sense of camaraderie. The night, which had started with fear, ended with a shared laughter, a memorable tale they would recount for years to come. As Wyatt's initial shock dissipated, he couldn't help but feel a grudging respect for the elaborate ruse his friends had pulled off. The effort, the planning, and the execution, it was all incredibly detailed and complex. What had seemed like a nightmare was actually a testament to their creativity and dedication to the joke. It was hard not to admire their commitment, even if it was at his expense. The overwhelming relief flooding through him quickly doused any spark of anger or frustration that flared within Wyatt. The fear, the tension, the sleepless nights, all were the result of an elaborate prank. Understanding this transformed his fleeting irritation into an appreciation for the lengths his friends had gone to, all for the sake of a laugh. Learning that the video footage had been deliberately erased as part of the prank added another layer to the deception. This revelation stirred a mix of emotions in Wyatt: irritation at the erasure of evidence, awe at the thoroughness of their planning. It was a detail so small yet critical, a testament to the depth of their scheme, equally infuriating and impressive. As the full extent of the prank settled in, Wyatt found himself oscillating between mild annoyance and a budding desire for retribution. The genius behind their plot had sparked a competitive streak in him, a challenge he was now eager to accept. The gears in his mind began to turn, plotting a comeback that would strike a perfect balance between creativity and surprise. In the end, camaraderie and the infectious nature of shared laughter triumphed over any lingering thoughts of payback. The ordeal had woven itself into the fabric of their shared history, a legendary tale they would all recount with gusto. Yet, amidst the mirth, Wyatt's promise of retribution lingered in the air, a playful threat that ensured the cycle of jokes and laughter would continue among them.